Today I'm sharing how to weave up loom waste and make a grocery shopping bag. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. This is how I organise a year's worth of loom waste that is long enough to tie together. This basket is all cotton or blends or a bit of silk, and this is what I use in loom waste projects. I've got some leftovers that have been wound off shuttles and the ends of projects, and lots of other different things that I can just sit and knot together and wind into a ball whilst I'm watching telly at night. This is my wool one. I don't have as much of this as I tend to use the wool to make crazy socks, and this basket holds all the little bits and pieces that are just too small or too knotted or matted or unable to use again. Everything in this big basket will end up as stuffing in a dog bed that I'm going to make next year. So these are the 4 balls that I've made so far. You recognise one of them. That's the one I made for the Soundstripe project. I've also made a few more, and these 2 I love because they're really nice bright colours. This one I just recently finished, and I've put a dark colour and then a light colour, but they're all quite short, so I wanted to see what that looks like. Here I'll show you how to do that weaver's knot, which is a low profile, really tight knot. So if you make a little circle with one end of the yarn, you poke the second thread through from underneath, wrap around the back, and then tuck the end in under where that yarn wound through, and then pull all 4 sections really tight together. And it's a really tight, good low profile knot that I've used for all of my loom waste scraps to knot them together. Then I've just wound them straight into a ball winder, so I'll usually do 3 or 4 or 5 sections, then wind onto the ball winder, and then continue to knot onto that end with a few more sections, wind on until I've got a nice big fat ball. I've tried to have some colour combinations in the balls too, so lights and darks are mixed together, bright colours all together, warm colours all together. And the ball I'm going to use first, I've just done blues, greens, whites, naturals and gold, so it'd be really great to see what that weaves up like. I think it works best if you have a think about the colours, but the second ball of yarn I'm using is basically just all sorts of bright colours, short sections put together and then separated with some long sections, so it'll be interesting to see what this looks like. I had a selection of patterns, but this is the bag I ended up making, and I wanted one just for shopping, and I didn't want it lined. I want to be able to chuck it in the wash if it gets dirty, and I wanted it to be fairly simple, so that's the one I ended up going for. For this project I'm using my 60 centimetre or 24 inch loom, my 10 dent reed, my hooks and clamps, which is my peg at the other end of my dining table, a threading hook, clamps for my loom, and of course scissors and some scrap yarn. And for the warp I'm using 8/4 cotton in natural. I've got this half used cone, and I've also pulled out a full one just in case I go through that half used one, but I don't think I will. After clamping my loom to my dining table, I just connect my apron rod to the heddle. This really helps with tension because it keeps the rod an equal distance from your pegs no matter where you are in the warping, which really helps with your tension. This is a super simple single colour, no pattern warp. And here is where I've made a mistake, and I've left this in. I've put my peg thing around the wrong way, so I've just fixed it there, but I think it's important to be real. I feel the responsibility as a content creator to be a real person and not a perfect person, not only because it's relatable, you know, when we all make stupid mistakes just like that one, but because we need to create a realistic impression of how to weave in a way that makes sense to beginners and experienced weavers alike. This allows people to feel normal no matter what kind of mistakes they make, and everyone makes them, even me. This was a super easy, quick warp up, and I didn't use that whole half a roll, so there's still a bit left. As always, I quickly check to make sure I haven't missed or doubled any slots, and I was warping through the slots only. The weaving width for this project was the width of my reed, which is 24 inches or 60 centimetres, minus 6 slots on each side. I'm going to cover up the peg holes with cardboard, and I really need to find a different solution for these pegs because it really is driving me nuts. And I think what I'll end up doing is getting some super thin dowels, because I've seen that on YouTube as well. When I do that, I will bring you on the journey, because I'll change my bigger loom and my smaller loom to the textile cord as well. The length of my warp was 1.9 meters, which is the length of my dining table. And as always, when it's the width or the length of my dining table, I will always wind on direct towards the pegs, just using brown paper as my warp separator. Then the hard work's done and the exciting part gets to begin. Threading is just standard, so I'm threading left to right, which means that I'm moving one thread from the slot to the hole on the right. If you're threading right to left, just move one thread from the slot to the hole on the left. Super easy, super quick. Also, once I've got 8 threads done, I will knot them down the bottom so that I can lash on. And I'll always lash on for 99% of my projects, especially cotton, because I rarely need a fringe. And there's no reason to tie on because you waste too much yarn. The only reason I'll ever tie on is if I want a fringe for, say, a scarf. To lash on, I use some scrap yarn that's about 4 to 5 lengths of the loom. I tie one onto the apron rod, and then I divide each little bundle of 8 threads in half, drop the yarn through the top, around the bottom of the apron rod, and continue on that way. I like to wind it into a little yarn butterfly as well, it just makes it easier to handle. Then I go through and tighten all the way from start to finish, and then check tension by just strumming the warp at the back of the heddle, just to make sure that everything's even and there's no slack areas that I need to fix up. Then I can tie it off and I'm ready to spread the warp. To spread the warp, I throw 3 picks of scrap yarn without beating. And then I will beat those 3 picks down together as one, making sure that I've got a nice straight line down the very bottom. And I like to go as close to the knots as I can. You sometimes need to wind on because the threads will tighten up on the back beam. I then repeat this and throw 3 more picks without beating, and then beat those 3 picks down together all the way down to where the knots are. And that's all I normally need to do to spread the warp. The first ball of loom waste I'm using is all made from small pieces, but I used blues, greens and golds and separated each colour with a white or a natural. I wound the entire ball onto a shuttle because I was going to weave with all of it. And I've left in all of the imperfections because I think I love the texture, and I wanted to see the texture that the knots and the extra bits of yarn from the knots did to the weaving. It also gives it a real natural look. And I have to say, I love the way this one is looking as it's weaving up. I will show you in a second, but I love the different way that it looks. It kind of looks like coloured birch bark in the way that the colours are separated by the whites and the naturals. I did do a section of natural and then a section of white in between the colours, and that really shows. So I think if I did it next time, I would do it as all white in between the colours or all natural. But this is how it's looking right now, and I just love it. I'm covering up the knots and the knobs from the textile cords with cardboard, and honestly in no time at all I'd already finished that ball. I find this kind of weaving quite exciting because I never really know what it's going to look like until I start weaving. I just love it. The second ball is made up of all sorts of bright coloured small pieces separated by one lightish coloured long piece that's been wound off a shuttle. So it gives you these bright multicoloured stripes, which I'm also really loving, to be honest. I don't think you can go wrong with this kind of project using this kind of loom waste. And of course, in no time at all, I'd finished that ball as well. And here I am almost done with the weaving, and I still love how having the textile cord lets you push the edge right to the heddle. Once I was done, I nipped off the weaving from the loom, just going in small sections at a time and then knotting it just with an overhand knot close to the weaving. Once I had finished that across the entire warp, here is the entire piece, and it's colourful and bright and beautiful, and I just love it. So now I'm going to pop this in the washing machine on a delicate cycle with a little bit of dish soap just to get rid of any machine oils from the making of the yarn, and then into the dryer just on a warm, and now I'm giving it a good press, ready to sew into my grocery bag. And here is a closer look of what the entire weaving looks like. Again, you don't have to make a grocery bag. You could make anything from this. It could be a table runner, placemats, I think even a washcloth or tea towels. The possibilities are just endless. You're only limited by your own imagination. But I'm choosing to make a grocery bag. So I'm folding the weaving twice, so in half and then in half again, so I've got 4 pieces. The pattern calls for cutting 8 pieces in this square shape, 4 of them to be sewn together for the outer and then 4 of them sewn together for the lining. But I didn't want mine lined because I want to be able to just bang it straight into the washing machine if something spills on it, and it will dry easy. Now this is not going to be the same shape because my 4 pieces are considerably shorter than the end, but I'm running with it anyway. So this is what happens when you leave your patterns out and your dog loves paper. But anyway, so instructions on the back are pretty easy. I'm going to choose to use some cotton cording as the handles, and I've got some wide white elastic for the sides to hold that together as well. After a quick read of the instructions, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to zigzag all of the edges, and then I can safely cut the top and the bottom off where the knots are. I'm also going to measure halfway and then just marking that with a little bit of chalk on either side. So that way I can zigzag either side of that chalk line, and then I'll be able to cut between and separate the weaving into 2 equal halves. I won't need to cut it into 4, just the 2, and then sew them together to make my square. The advantage of zigzagging and then cutting your weaving apart is not only it doesn't unravel, but also your raw edges are already treated so they don't remain raw. So not only is it easy to cut things apart, but it's also good because your edges are already treated and ready to go. Once I cut the edges off and then cut them apart, I sewed the 2 rectangles together to make my square. And then I was ready to put the elastics on the side. The pattern says to just choose 2 opposite sides to put the elastic in, but I decided I wanted a bag that had 2 sides. So one side had that birch bark looking weaving, and the other side had those colourful stripes. So basically making it double-sided. So that's what I ended up doing. So following the instructions, I cut 2 pieces of elastic to the size indicated in the pattern, and I don't want to say what the sizes are because it is a purchased pattern and I need to be fair to the creator of the pattern. So once I had my 2 pieces of elastic cut and ready to go, I had to fold up the sides to make a channel for that elastic to sit in. So I folded the edge once and then again, and then used the elastic to check that the channel I was making was sufficient for the elastic to go through. And I started from the middle so that I could make sure that it was even. And then the pattern also says to stop within a few inches of the edge, both edges. And this is to allow for the channel on the other two sides that will hold the handles. Once I had both of the sides pinned out ready to go, I sewed them as close as I could to the edge, which made sure that that channel remained big enough for the elastic. Then I just popped a safety pin on the end of one of the pieces of the elastic and then threaded it through that channel. The pattern states to stop when the far end of the elastic lines up to the entry point that you put it in, and I'll show you what this looks like in a second. But once it's in to that edge, then I pin through all of the layers, so the elastic and the channel at that edge, and then I will sew vertically down through all of the layers on that edge of the elastic, and that will keep that end piece in place. Then I keep pushing the elastic through to the other side and do the same thing. So when the elastic is at the edge of that channel, pin through all three layers, so front, back and the elastic, and then sew vertically through all three layers. And I can repeat this for both sides. And this is what it's looking like now with the elastic finished and sewn in on both sides. Now I've gone ahead and created the channels on the other two sides of the square. I've made these fairly wide to ensure that not only the cotton rope goes through for the handles, but also there's room for the fabric to move depending on how big the load is and how much stuff I've actually got in my grocery bag. This is for the cotton rope to go through that will end up being the handles. So I've gone ahead and cut the cotton rope to the lengths indicated in the pattern, and I've done the same thing as with the elastic. I've popped a safety pin in one end and then wriggled it through the channel until it came out the other side. I originally chose to do a simple overhand knot for this, but I found that I just couldn't get the knot into the channel, and I didn't want the knot on the outside of the handle. So what I did was the weaver's knot, because I knew that that was a fairly low profile knot and a really good strong knot that you can really pull tight and is less likely to come undone. I made sure to pull the knot really as tight as I could, and I cut off the excess just to reduce bulk, but not too much excess that it would encourage it to come undone. So that seemed to work out really well. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your patience as I had a little bit of a break from YouTube. But don't fear, we've got an action-packed towel series coming up soon, and I can't wait to bring that to you. As always, thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.